Good morning and welcome to this Ludgate Lecture named after Bright Blue's offices at Ludgate Hill and featuring prominent thinkers on the big issues of our time. Particularly given the tribal politics on show just now, we'd like to emphasise we're an independent think tank that seeks to defend and improve liberal society. We're delighted this morning to welcome Dame Rachel de Souza, the Children's Commissioner for England, speaking on the topic of education after the pandemic. We've heard a lot of people talking about resilience and preparation in health and in the economy, but it's gone a bit quiet on the education front. Yet a good and fair education is the basis of a liberal society. Rachel's a former head teacher and a passionate educationalist, so I can't think of anyone better to address the Bright Blue audience on this topic. She'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then I'll follow with a few questions while we wait for the audience to put your questions via Slido. The link is below the YouTube screen, and the code is hashtag Ludgate Lectures. We'll be live tweeting the event using the hashtag Bright Blue. Dame Rachel de Souza, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I am delighted to be here to talk with this brilliant audience about how the pandemic's impacted children, their education, and how we can respond. Sorry, we've just got a slight technical issue, and we'll be with you in 1 second. Right, sorted. As Children's Commissioner for England, my priority is and always has been to listen to children across the country, to hear their lives and of course to hear about the impact of lockdown. And if we move over a slide, this is why in 2021 I launched the Big Ask, the largest survey of its kind in the world in terms of response. Second only to the US Census, but the biggest response in England ever from children and across the world. And we had the privilege of hearing from just over 500,000 children across England about their experience of the pandemic, their lives today, their dreams for the future, and their ideas for how we can help them achieve their ambitions. And as policymakers, I believe we must listen to children of all ages, from all backgrounds, and with all needs about how we can create a world that really supports them to succeed. And if we use their experiences and their ideas for how we can improve, I don't think our policies can go far wrong. So what I heard from the children we spoke to was inspiring. They are a generation of thoughtful, passionate individuals who care deeply about their communities and care deeply about getting a good education. And as adults, we need to ensure we have support systems and the correct systems in place to help them thrive. What the children have told me in the Big Ask has given me a wealth of understanding into what children want and need from the systems, particularly education, that support them. And the responses have helped form my business plan, which has been divided into 7 pillars, with education right at the centre. And today I wanted to share some of these priorities with you and what I think we can do to help children now. So over to the next slide. One of the things that came through strongly in the Big Ask responses were that children spoke about how much they care for and want a better world, how much they care for each other and for society as a whole, and you won't be surprised how much they care for the environment. They're an altruistic generation, and it's because of this I'll continue to prioritise listening to children and ensuring their voices are at the heart of policy making, particularly on these issues that they care most about. Another key theme, so over to the next slide, was family. In the Big Ask, children told us how much they care about their families, how much they value seeing them, whatever form home life takes. And it's a fundamental pillar of children's lives and their well-being. However, what modern families look like has completely changed, and we cannot expect to have effective family and children's policies, or education policies for that matter, if we don't know who they are and how they interact with the services that support them. So when the government, it was Kemi actually, asked me to conduct an independent review into contemporary family life, I immediately got to work. And we're speaking to as many children, families and family services as possible to understand family life today, to understand the services that are provided to families, how that supports children's education through children's eyes, and what can be done to improve them. So last month, I launched the results from the first family review call to action. Nearly 4,000 children over a couple of weeks told me what family meant to them. And as what one teenage boy said, family means everything to me. Family celebrates the good times and are there to support you during the bad times. Children told me about who they consider to be family. Yes, their mom, dad, grandma, granddad, relatives, but also their friends and even their pets. One child in care talking to me about their pet was the only stable relationship they had. Another teenager said, my family are the people closest to me as a literal definition, but they also include close friends. They're the people who are closest to me, know me well, and are going to be there for the long term. Children spoke about family in a very moving way. A girl told me, family means to me spending time together, being loved, feeling safe. My mum, my sister, my pets. Over the next few months, we're going to be launching more calls to action aimed at families with young children and aimed at schools. And particularly, we're going to be going out through all schools. I encourage you to share these in the months ahead. I'm looking forward to uncovering exactly what family means to children and parents today, and how and where it has a protective effect, and sharing these findings later this year. Now, before I go into pure education, I also wanted to mention children in care. And so if we go to the next slide, and I've been talking to head teachers and trust leaders and teachers all summer about the responses from children in care. Why? Well, there are 80,000 children in care. I'd say that's the equivalent of about 80 big secondary schools. These children often need the most support to succeed at school and do well. And I think we must judge our success on their success above all else. I mean, local authorities are legally the corporate parent, but I think we should all act like their parents too. And we need to ask ourselves, would what they're experiencing be good enough for their own child? And if not, we must do better. Nearly 6,000 children in care responded to the Big Ask. And while some spoke of positive and loving experiences, others spoke about a lack of consistency and stability, which was limiting their life chances, absolutely heartbreakingly. Children in care want the same things as all other children: to be loved, to have friends, to make plans for the future. The overwhelming thing was just one adult who stays with us and cares for us. But I've spoken to so many care leavers, and they remember two things. And it's consistent. One is the day they were taken into care, where often they're not told the truth because people are too worried or it's too hard to tell them, but they know what's happening. Lots of them have been carers for parents pretty much until that point. And secondly, that one teacher in school who just had the quiet word with them, let them know they understood, and made a bit of space for them. And that, right into adult life, having a massive impact. And I look back on my time as a head and think, did I do it enough? And I've been exhorting our head teachers around the country to say, you know who you looked after children are, you know what their outcomes are, just make sure you're talking to them, because that one group, I think education, through the education system, we can make a huge difference for. Schools are a primary source of support for children who are vulnerable. And while it's not a teacher's job to play the role of social worker, children are likely to open up to their teachers, and teachers are well placed to spot problems. And in fact, in every area that children discussed in response to the Big Ask, they thought the best place for them to seek support and the most trusted place was school. And feeling that support is linked so crucially to those children's performance and outcomes as well. So I think it's vital that we start to build a team of support around the school so children can get the help they need. And I've seen unbelievably how inconsistent support and services are around this country. And I know too often teachers end up filling these gaps. And for too long, schools have not had a place at the safeguarding table. I've been calling for schools to become full and statutory members of safeguarding partnerships. And I'm delighted this is getting so much traction. There are thousands of people working in England's care system, striving to achieve all the good things we've talked about. But too often, this is in spite of a bureaucratic system which frustrates efforts to ensure children receive the best care, whether that's children in care, whether that's children with mental health needs, special educational needs and disabilities. And more than anything, I think the system needs a capacity to respond to children's needs on their own terms and to adapt these needs as they change. And children need to be given genuine agency over their own lives and decisions that affect them. We need to listen to them, backed up by the confidence that the support they need will be there for them, and they can rely on the relationships they've developed, and they can plan for the future. Now, we've just seen the care review, we've just seen the schools white paper, the SEND review. I'm hopeful once recent traumas are settled that these can start to deliver genuine change for the children in England that need it most. I am absolutely passionate about this. I mean, last week I spoke to 3 Secretaries of State for Education: Monday, Nadeem; Wednesday, Michelle; Friday, James. And to all of them, I stressed, that we've done so much in education reform, but to achieve that last 20% of outcomes, to make sure all children are recipients of this amazing, I mean, I became head teacher in 2005-06, and I've watched the system develop over those years through successive governance, with reform in education improving and improving. I am shocked by how the other services that are meant to be, I mean, I've walked into sort of children's services and I'm shocked by the lack of reform there. And I think we need to take that reform spirit to children's social care, and really sort of bring in the accountability, the support, the laser-like focus to improve that. And if we don't do that, we're not going to ensure that every child gets the education that they absolutely deserve. So over to jobs and skills, we're again, a key theme. So one of the surprising things for me, I think we need to move the slide, please. One of the surprising things for me in the big ask was how having a good job, the number one thing that children wanted for their future was having a good job and a good career. I think it's about 74% of children. It's very high and very clearly the number one thing. There is no shortage of ambition, no shortage of aspiration among England's children. They want to work hard, and they spoke in terms of not just jobs, but careers, often civic-minded careers. I'm minded of going to Bolton to visit a school just as we were coming out of lockdown, where the Delta variant was just about to be sort of recognised publicly. So a week before that. And in this school, Lesser Academy in Bolton, in the heart of the Pakistani Kashmiri community, where vaccinations had been quite low, 30 parents or close adults had died to their children. And do you know what their response was? Their response was they'd stepped up to look after their health, to keep themselves well. They were trying to challenge obesity. They were trying to challenge, try to have healthy lives. But their real focus was on their careers and their futures. Let's be the doctors, let's be the nurses, let's be the scientists who can discover vaccines of the future. Children are, against the narrative we often hear, I find children unbelievably aspirational and excited about the futures. I met the next 2 future prime ministers, and we might need one, mightn't we? So, really ambitious children. Children wanted to be able to afford a good adulthood, but are not always confident of getting there other than via university, which transfers pressure to their experience of school. So one of the big barriers that children talked about, worries, was failing their exams. It isn't that they want continuous assessment. It isn't that they have a preferred model of examination. They want to roll their sleeves up. They want to do well, but they were frightened that the bar, particularly at 18, is so high stakes to getting into a good university. And we're going to be seeing this again this summer, that the sort of level of concern and anxiety, there was almost a national cry of support. We need help to catch up, because we've got to hit that bar. And I think there's something quite powerful there. I had 9-year-olds worrying about whether they would succeed. And I think as a country, we just need to think about that. They want more information on vocational careers. There was a large group of children who were saying, I want, and we had responses from all 151, no fewer than 3% of children in all 151 local authority areas, 6% of cohort overall, of 4 to 18-year-olds. And there was a really sort of solid 20% plus who were saying, we want to know about apprenticeships, we want to know about vocational careers, we want to know about adult life, we want to know more about opportunities and how to be successful in adult life. And I thought, and that was a really powerful message, as well as the university message. So for an aspiration for lots of our children was, I want a great job in a local, my local area. I'm really proud of where I live, and I wanted training and to be able to have a future and create a life and a family and friends. So following a big ask, I was pleased to see the government continue the Kickstart scheme, but I think there's more to do in terms of improving quality and quantity of apprenticeships. We must improve careers guidance in school. I could take any year 11 group and make sure they got great maths and English results. I'm not confident that our careers guidance and our advice about adult life and, the pathways, supported internships for those most at risk of becoming NEET. I'm not sure those things are in place as well as they should be, and we need more focus on them. Again, jobs and skills remain a key challenge for that group I talked to you about, care leavers, a group of young people that I and society have a particular responsibility for. And I'm going to be establishing a care leavers advisory board. I'd love them to talk to Bright Blue and to anyone here who's interested to ensure we really understand their needs. Now, one thing I want to talk about, and Sarah's heard me talk about this as well. In the Big Ask, girls spoke about the importance of female STEM role models. And, I've heard lots of nonsense about girls and maths recently. I totally believe girls love hard maths. I had when I was a trust leader of a group of schools, I set up a maths and science specialist free school sixth form, and saw superb young women, going to the best universities, who found and really ambitious. And I think we need, and one of the things I've done in the past month or two is launch a series of career profiles of women who use maths in their jobs. I want girls to be able to link STEM subjects to where they dream of taking their careers, and that message of how important the maths education is, we really need to step for people's future. We really need to stay on top of. Over to the next slide, please. So very briefly, I wanted to touch on community. So when I asked children the three biggest barriers for them thriving coming out of lockdown, the first was their mental health wellbeing, the second was education, life at school, and the third was places to go, things to do. And children told us that for them, community is having a place to go after school and so much more. It's about how they feel, how they treat people, how they're treated by others, where they live. They told us about where they felt safe, where they don't. Girls told us they're more worried about their personal safety than boys. And all children told us how difficult the online world can be. And I think I've been following the path and contributing to the online safety bill. Now, whatever your views are about it, I do believe strongly that we need greater age assurance and and we need the tech companies to be stepping up and taking responsibility there. I am I'm constantly working with the tech companies and asking them to take underage children offline. The vulnerable become even more vulnerable online. I'm also, after all the things I've heard, I am really concerned about children's life online, and I do think we need to look at regulation and keeping children safe on there. And we've done a huge amount of work on this. And alongside this work on the bill, I've been exploring the role of pornography in shaping children's understanding of sex, consent and relationships. And I've just been asked by the Secretary of State to look at relationships and sex education in schools. Again, children have told us they want trusted adults, their teachers, to be able to teach them about the things they need to know to keep them safe from harassment, to understand what relationships are like. And I would far rather have them learning this in a sensitive, age-appropriate way at school, and than learning this from TikTok, which, I've heard far too many dreadful, sorry, I'm losing my voice, dreadful children having dreadful experiences of. Not least, I was just thinking of a little girl the other day who was looking back. She was a teenager. I got 16 to 21-year-olds to speak to me about what they wish their parents had known about their life online. And one of those girls was saying how 15 or 16. She had a new boyfriend, you know, it was a moment, the sweetest moment of, you know, their first kiss. And he put his arms around her neck and tried to strangle her. And, you know, she said she was totally horrified. And he told her he'd seen that on, you know, porn sites and on social media sites, and thought that that's what you did. And I think when we're getting into situations like that, and I am hearing this time and time again, these kinds of stories, we need far better and more sensitive RSE in schools. So quickly to children's health and wellbeing. I mentioned to you that mental health and mental wellbeing was the #1 concern for children coming out of lockdown. That's unsurprising. And I think, I mean, it was shocking to me that 1 in 5 children who responded were worried about their mental health. It was the biggest concern. Not surprising coming out of isolation, coming out of not seeing your peers, but it was an overwhelming response. So that's why I was really pleased to see DHSC's landmark consultation on a 10-year plan for mental health and wellbeing. We've been speaking to children about what they want to see in an early help offer, where they'd like to receive help, and what would work for that early kind of mental well-being issue, personal well-being issue, how adults might better support children. I mean, I'd like to see prioritisation of funding children's mental health services with the aim that 100% of children will be able to access services. There's lots that can be done, you know, that should be done outside, but I do think school is a critical place for both children being able to seek support, but also to keep their wellbeing levels high. It's sport, it's fun, it's being with your peers. Children talk to me about missing school dinners, would you believe it? How much they love their teachers. It's that getting back to normal life that's actually going to improve their lives and ensure positive, I think, mental health, for want of a better word. And I sort of leave that thought there. So finally to schools. So I truly believe, so if we can move over to the next slide, I have been involved in the reform of the school system, absolutely, you know, at the sort of front line of this since 2005. I was Tony Blair's number 67 sponsored academy principal. After that, opened my second academy in 2010 as the coalition came in, and have opened 14 schools in my own trust. And I passionately believe in the freedoms we've been given. There's so much to be celebrated. And what an exciting and brilliant time to deliver what was my passion right from 2005, which was that the disadvantaged children could receive absolutely the same, if not better, an education than any child anywhere in this country. But as I said before, we need to keep going, and we need to keep going with our partners to deliver for every child. So take it as read from me. The education system is so much better than when I started as a head in 2005. Schools are unrecognisably better, but the job is not yet finally done. We desperately need better support for our children with SEND and those in alternative provision. These children tell me how ambitious they are for themselves and their future, but unfortunately, too often, the quality of support and educational provision for them is highly variable, with some areas letting them down. This needs to change. On the same day as the publication of the government SEND consultation, I published my own report. Alongside, I worked hard with the government on the SEND Green Paper. In fact, in June I came in March. In June, I saw the first iteration of the SEND Green Paper and basically sent it back, spoke to the then Secretary of State and said, I can't support it. So there was a reboot over summer, and we've ended up with a far greater SEND Green Paper. So I worked closely on that, but I also published on the publication day my own report on the inconsistent approach to SEND across England. For example, I analysed 650 EHCPs in 2 LAs. The EHCP is your role statement, it's your plan. We found massive variation in the accessibility of EHCPs and the extent to which outcomes were specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. So I really welcome the government's focus and proposals for a nationally consistent system, standardising and digitising EHCPs, and national standards. These are things I call for. We absolutely need them. We need more accountability in the SEND system, and we need the whole system to coalesce around the child. These are a step in the right direction. And we need to ensure children's experiences and outcomes are central to any system we seek to deliver. And that's why I'm making it my mission to place children's voices at the heart of the response to the SEND Green Paper. I'm speaking over the next few weeks to hundreds of children with SEND across England to explore the barriers they face and understand what they want the system to look like. Now, the ambition in the Schools White Paper is clear. A flourishing school system can only be achieved by schools working in partnership with each other in strong families of schools. So the achievements of the very best schools can reach every corner of the country and every child. And I think that with these layers of legislation, SEND Green Paper, Care Review, Schools White Paper, we really do have a once in a lifetime chance. So I'm hoping politics settles and we can actually really push these through and get them right. On to my next slide, please. I couldn't leave you without talking about something that I think is the bedrock of any conversation we have now, and that's attendance. Attendance. I mean, even before the pandemic, there's been a group of children who've struggled to attend school regularly and have fallen through the gaps of our education system. Coming out of this pandemic, this has absolutely got worse. Almost 1 in 4 children were persistently absent from school, compared to around 1 in 9 in 2018-2019. And last month, the findings of my attendance audit were published, informed by a deep dive into attendance in 10 LAs, speaking to children missing from education. Now, why did I do that? So I went out and tried to find the children who weren't here, because I got so worried about attendance this year. I did a survey and I used my F2 powers. So anywhere that has responsibility for children in the public sector has to give me information without FOIs. And I wrote to all 151 local authorities and said, how many children have you got in your area? How many children are persistently absent, missing 10% of their education? How many children are severely absent, missing 50% of their education? How many children are not in education at all, missing from education completely? And I was absolutely confounded by the responses I got. First of all, the bizarre thing is, I could not get a clear answer, and many LAs don't have a clear answer on how many children they have in their areas. In terms of children missing from education, 1 London borough. So these are children who might be waiting for assessments, not on a roll, highly vulnerable. 1 London borough, very clear, 750. Our second major city, one of our largest, I don't think it's our second, one of our largest cities told me 3 children missing from education. Well, I know that's not the case. 1.7 million or so persistently absent. So that's up 50% from 2019. Only 20% of that extra 50% is because of COVID. And, the same with, up 50% on severely absent. So that's children missing 50% of their time. So when I went out and looked at why, first of all, our data wasn't right. We now have, we've put in place at DFE now a pilot that about 64% of schools are involved in, just to suck the data from attendance from schools to LAs to the DFE. Why has it taken us this long? If this is done well, then there's going to be a really positive outcome from the dreadful pandemic. If we actually sort data out, and it's 2022, we should be able to do it. But those children not at school. So we went to 10 local authorities and talked to hundreds of them. And I think 3 main reasons. Some just not come back at all. Some with mental health anxiety issues that need support to get back. And a large group with special educational needs waiting for assessment, or they've gone home and just stayed home because it's just better. And that should be so instructive to us. I also found in a number of counties, the police with lists of children that are not on anybody's roll and nobody knows about. So I've set out a number of ambitions in my recent paper about what we need to do, but the biggest thing I think we need to focus on is let's get the kids back for September. What I can tell you, I've just worked with schools and found out that if children are not back done a piece of research, if children are not back in the first few days after September, the new term in the new year, the likelihood of them not coming back is 40%. We need to get the children back in September. And I think that's got to be critical number one. I'm also keen, you might have heard me talking about single unique identifier. We need to be using the same identifying number for a child, whether they're in health, education, or children's social care, so we can actually support them and pick them up where they are, where they're needed, and try and get them back into school. So I think for me, absolutely critical that we get the children back to school, because I hope what I've talked about today, rather than talking about curriculum and catch up, are some of the fundamental and deeper issues that are preventing children from achieving after the pandemic, not least being in school. So on to my final slide. I wanted to end, because I've been talking about the Big Ask, with a quote from the Big Ask. We got 250,000 text responses. I've read many of them, and you know, they're often deeply moving, but this one struck me right between the eyes. So I wanted it, you know, and I used it to end our Big Ask, Big Answers piece of work. When we asked children what was holding them back in England in 2021, a 16-year-old boy told us something sad. The social stigma of children from lower class backgrounds trying to achieve something bigger than themselves. I'll read that again. Children from lower class backgrounds trying to achieve something bigger than themselves. I never expected to hear that in 2021. And we should tell him, of course, there is nothing bigger than the lives of children. So not to scorn ambition, we could try to build something equal to it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. At least after that fascinating talk, at least the children will know that you have their back, and it's really sort of inspiring to hear that. And some of those things that you've been talking about, the 1.7 million children missing, seems really, really shocking. And the sense that children can disappear. So that's really interesting about the sort of joined up system, so that someone knows. And it does seem to go back to that sort of taking a village to bring up a child, that sense of collective responsibility. On the care leavers, we'd love to take you up on that offer at Bright Blue to have a proper engagement, so that we can really find a good answer for that. Because if it comes back to your final quote, that people feel that somehow they will be stigmatized and held back, when you say that actually there is all this opportunity now and that there is progress in schools, that's what we really have to intervene on. I was interested too on your point about now that people are understanding exams are sort of back, and that they could be harder perhaps this year, that you know, that can be worrying a 9-year-old. And so maybe a broader sense of what the skills, what the vocations are, so that people don't feel too sort of funneled. And as always, the idea that people shouldn't ever feel that they must give up and that there's no one on their side. So I found that, you know, tremendously interesting. On the online harm, I mean, it's obviously sort of interesting because it's current, and we've talked before about age verification and how you balance protection of children with sort of free speech. Is there, can you see a way of sort of reconciling this? You know, that people, the argument against is that if you do verification, there'll be unintended consequences, and that the technology doesn't quite work, and it'll be a license for paedophiles to take data. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's look, I mean, no, I am absolutely your number one supporter of freedom, right? So, I mean, I am, I've been an academy principal. I've been part of that movement that's been about bringing greater freedom. And one of my worries is, and one of my sadnesses is that we've brought together both the free speech elements, free speech issues, and children's safety in this bill. But I have supported the bill, and I've supported the bill particularly around children's safety because of what I've heard. I mean, when I got those hundreds of 16 to 21-year-olds to sort of tell me, and I basically said, we're going to write a document. It's going to be what I wish my parents had known. Yeah. So you're thinking about your younger siblings, you're thinking about, and, whilst there are a number of things there, I certainly didn't have a clue about. When I asked those young people, what in your own words do you think should happen? Their concern was really about keeping younger kids off social media sites, but also ensuring that material that really isn't appropriate for under 18s, or for particular age groups, up to 18, should be kept away. So it's the stories about algorithms sending eating disorders, kids talking to me about things they found on there that really exacerbated problems that they had, and has led me to believe that we should, number one, the social media companies know when kids are underage. They should take them off, full stop. If they were doing that job, we wouldn't be having to have a bill to put, and having to sort of call for age assurance. It's almost because of a failure there, because of their business models. We somehow need to get these companies just realizing that that the business model will be more successful if they actually are responsible around children. And I mean, I have sat with them for hours, trust me, and had ministers with them, and straightforward. I mean, the porn companies were like, put age verification on all of us, that's fine, that'll work for us, because we don't want kids on there, just do it to all of us. Or the social media companies are far trickier, and actually it's the social media companies where children find harmful content. So if anyone can think of a better way to deal with this, that's the problem I'm trying to solve.
And we've got some questions coming in, just to remind people if they could go directly to Slido or to ask online, putting in the code hashtag Ludgate Lecture. But there's been interest in your idea about having a more holistic sense of children in family life, that it goes back to what they want, which is to be loved and supported in a family. But that suggests that the family has to be right. And one thing we know that happened during the pandemic was there was a lot of hidden abuse, domestic violence, and so on. Is there, are you asking for more sort of powers, or just who intervenes in family life to make sure that children getting the kind of support that they need?
Really interesting question. So again, there are so many debates, aren't there? And people take a side, a family looks like this, or this is what, or we shouldn't intervene, or we should intervene. So one of the things that I found most fascinating, for example, I was sitting in Felixstowe a few weeks ago with a group of parents and their 15-year-old sons, and mums and 15-year-old sons, range of things in the school. And they were talking about first of all, what family meant to them, and what support they needed. And in terms, I was really moved. I was listening to one mom talking about, an abusive husband, what had happened, and her 15-year-old son, who was cool boy, really, cool guy, just tapping her on the arm and saying, don't worry, mum, we're here, we love you, and the overwhelming message from around the country, from every, we've talked to, every age group, including those teenagers, including sort of younger parents of younger families, right across the piece, and grandparents. Family is love, is trust, is support, and we should actually, and we've done some big sort of representative research, and we'll be sharing that, showing that it's absolutely overwhelmingly the bedrock of our society, and it's broader in scope, which is what I was hinting at, but singularly important. And so the first thing we've been trying to do is look at how services can actually see families where they really are to support them, particularly the most vulnerable. But on your point about so my thing is that listening job, and then ensuring government understands family and is able then to respond. So we so often silo children, parents, mothers, fathers, so that's a bit of the job I've been trying to do. But on the abuse, I mean, no question, I mean, who will ever forget the words of Arthur Lavinia Hughes saying, "Nobody loves me, nobody cares for me," and I sit there and think about him in that home. He did have a place in school as a vulnerable child, but obviously it fell down between the cracks. And of course, we must make sure our sort of child protection at that most acute end is world-beatingly excellent. And one of the things, after when that national report came out, so the report on Alpha and Star, I sat with Nadeem Zahawi, and he looked at me like, "We cannot have this, we cannot have more than this." And I said, "Yeah, the report's great, but it's actually saying what we've been saying for the last 20 years, which is, and the Monroe report and whatever, we need better multi-agency working, we need this, we need that." And I was like, "Minister, we need to look at implementation. We need to be thinking about how this is really working on the ground. We need to bring in better accountability. We need to 50% of local authority areas are judged by Ofsted to be children's social care, or judged by Ofsted to be requires improvement or inadequate. Inadequate means you're not safe, child's not safe. I mean, we have to bring the passion and knowledge that we got from reforming public service areas to children's social care, so that we can protect children. How has social workers been managed? First of all, are we listening to children? Secondly, are social workers been managed well, so they're out there, they're not thinking about thresholds or paperwork, they're thinking about, is that child safe now? Are managers enabling that? Are senior leaders enabling that? Now, some of our children's social care areas are the best thing you've ever seen, and we can be rightly proud of them. When I go to Leeds, 2-time outstanding, I see excellence right the way through. We need everyone to be as good as the best. So my challenge to Nadeem was I want to set up a national board, put the best system leaders on there, take these great words from these reports and turn them into action. And again, this is directly affects education, because do you know that 1 in 4 children with a social worker are still not back in school? 1 in 4 children with a social worker is still not back in school now. It's the effects of the pandemic are affecting the most vulnerable the worst. So yeah.
For that 1 in 4, because that's such a striking, awful figure, should that be then and you say that there may not be on even any where you actually find their names, but presumably it starts.
Those are there. If you've got a social worker,
you will be on a record. But then should that start? You want to get everyone back in September. Does that start with some preemptive measures from schools, going and knocking on doors, checking that the child will be coming?
100%. 100%. It's really simple operational work that needs to happen. And I have been, any head teacher in this country will tell you, I have been exhorting them and local authorities to do this now. So, but basically they need to be having the conversations, parents, social workers, schools, children. It's the little things. When we ask these kids, what will get you back in? It's often that club, that teacher, that lunch. It's really practical. So I mean, where schools and MATs in the most deprived areas are getting these children in and are being successful already, first, they use their procedures. So first day calling, all of that stuff. Secondly, they take each child and they say, whatever it takes. We go visit them, we find out what the problem is, we talk to the parents, talk to whoever. If it's special educational needs, if it's worry about bullying, if it's whatever, we just deal with it. And we need that level of, absolute drive to get these children in. And thirdly, it's the culture of the school. It's the ethos and culture of the school. Do you want to be there? So, most children, it's that what's happening, where are the clubs, where's the drama, where's the after school sport, where are the things that that child likes to really, really pin them in. But you are totally right, Sarah. There is a job for us to do which is about that talk to the child, talk to the family. What is it going to take to get them in? It's as simple as that. It's always relationships. If they don't come in for the first 4 days of the new term, they are 40% likely not to come in. We know that. So for the whole year, and September in a child's mind is the time you can just start again. It's if whatever's happened, you just have that moment of maybe I could, and it's that, isn't it? So yeah, we need Sarah, I need you and Bright Blue saying, children, back in.
That's going to be the call, back in school. And it's interesting because there's been quite a lot of talk about the curriculum and making sure that children attain exams and places and so on beyond that. But you talk about the clubs and the social network of the school and so on. Is there more that should be done either to promote that, or do schools have enough of that social that social extra?
So what children told us, without how much they'd missed school, how much they valued their education, so the formal bit of their education, because they knew they needed it. They talked to me about how they loved their teachers. They were just coming out of lockdown, so they might have been a bit effusive there, but how much they love their teachers. But the things that really, really sort of, when I said, what would make it better? What could we do? It was all about that sort of wider experience. And I'm a great fan of a slightly longer day so that we can make sure we've got the sports, the drama, the arts. I mean, I've seen superb days planned by head teacher colleagues where, children can pick electives at the end of the day. And that's and that could be everything from, robot making to sport to, classical Greek club to drama and it doesn't fall by postcode interest in these things. Children are amazingly interested in what they're interested in. And that's the thing that brings them in. So you can, if you've got a slightly longer day, you can do a session getting homework done, then a session on all the clubs and activities, and then family time. It's, mum, you can get home and you're not worrying about all that stuff. So I am a passionate advocate. And one of the reasons I like families of schools, so I ran a group of 14 schools, is that we would share our budgets. And then we could help the smaller schools put those things on by sharing our funding so that every child, I remember having a school in one of my schools, Great Yarmouth Primary Academy on Dickens Close in Great Yarmouth, with 70% free school meals. And because we shared our budgets, we were able to put on horse riding, with the nags from Lowestoft. And those children thought they were at Pony Club and they stood taller, that experience. And it's we're by the sea, so we did a bit of sailing, and it wasn't glamorous, it was fairly cheap, but it was life-changing. Those children stood taller. And I think back to your school days, what were the things that made, were exciting? It was often the trip. You remember that trip or that social thing that you did at school, it's and I think particularly post-pandemic.
And that sense of sort of sharing resources too. On the school day, could you have some schools opening? I mean, obviously it depends on the area. So because not all schools will want a longer school day. How do you persuade schools to do that?
So this goes back to our freedom point, doesn't it? One of the wonderful things that I think has happened in education that I've experienced as a head is that, and that I think the academies movement, the free schools movement, what we've done, so I started as a Tony Blair Academy, but 2010 with a coalition, the foot went on the gas and suddenly those freedoms were available to everyone. And now we're sort of grouping into groups of schools around the country. And it's generally felt that it's those families, small families of schools that are going to whatever. Now, to your point, of course, we shouldn't have a straitjacket of every school must do X. I had 14 schools and they all offered a different thing because their parents wanted a different thing. So, you know, in Great Yarmouth, we had a proper longer day where children, we had their tea and then they stayed for, you know, they did their homework, their prep, and then they did their fun, and then mum came to pick them. Now, only 6 parents ever removed them from that, and within 2 weeks the kids came running back anyway. Now that community, that worked really well for. My Norwich Free School, Jane Austen College, had the electives, and working parents loved it. They'd fight to get a place in that school because homework was done, so great activities were there. Now, if you've got a child doing Olympic karate, of course they could go off to their training. You know, we don't have to put straitjackets in. Some schools just want an extra half an hour, and that's the freedom, isn't it? But I think one of the things I'm pushed really hard for is that we keep our freedoms and we use them, and use them for our communities and for our children as best. So
another question about how to introduce that aspiration and make people more sort of job ready. It's very interesting that people are so aware of wanting jobs, and it's hearteningly conservative with a small c. That people want jobs and they want family. Yeah. So should business be involved more? How do you see that working then?
Yes. So I think I said a lot of things that maybe didn't come out, but on children's aspirations for their future, their careers, their jobs, and also that group of children very much wanting, you know, that there was this real sense of like civic pride. I want to stay in Carlisle, I'd like an apprenticeship, and I want a house, and I want to, you know, and I think we've got a bit of a key to sort of motivating that group of young people who often aren't that interested in school. They want to do different things. They want to be, you know, so I think business engagement is one of the things that the education system, although there are pockets of really good things, we really haven't done this well. I think teachers often don't know how to talk to business. Business often doesn't know how to work with schools. And it's and I would really, really prioritize that as a new education secretary. When I sit with the CEOs, I've done all this, you know, been to all these dinners, etc., where I've had the sort of bosses of, you know, some of the biggest firms in our country, you know, the BMW, your Mercedes, and they're like, how do we engage with schools? And I talked to them for about 10 minutes and they're like, well, we could do this. and I think I think government can help schools with that engagement by putting people together. Because for me, it's not a big national scheme. It's how to make it work locally. You know, when I talked you know, some great examples. I remember talking to the Marks and Spencer boss about just explaining what vocational curriculums, and he was like, could we do this? Could we do that? I'm like, yes, of course. I mean, if I was Secretary of State, pulling these sort of business leaders together to look at qualifications and to think about internships. They know better than schools do. But what I can tell you is children are crying out for this, and particularly your 14-plussers who are like, why am I sitting here doing this? I want I want a job. I want to know about the world. There's a group of children we could really, really excite, I think, and engage. I'll tell you a little secret. In my second headship, so my second school where I was a principal, I set up a beauty salon to motivate the girls, and we had beta, but they didn't just do nails and lashes and things. They learned about business. They did A-level physiology modules, even though they were 14. They had to do their EBAC subjects. And Michael Gove came to visit my school, and I took him to my beauty salon, and he got his nails done, and he was amazed. He was like, they're real people. I was like, yes, they've got the community in and they're making money. And it was so motivational. And but it wasn't you either do vocational or you do academic. Not at all. It was, you know, the vocational was motivational for the academic. It gave a real tangible reason as to why. Now, I don't see why, and I know there are good examples of this, but I think we're missing a trick by not doing this, and thinking about what areas. I mean, we need business to tell us what areas they need people trained in, what we should be doing. I mean, I know we've got all the data from LEPS, but there's nothing like a good business contact who will commit to those children in that place. And I think that's what we need to be doing.
Also on our to-do list, and you do say if you were Secretary of State, a lot of people would wish that you were. I think it is. So the final.
There are too many Secretaries of State. We need just normal workers. Like I think.
Which is the final question that came in, which is which of the candidates best represents your vision for education? Do you think? Do you have one?
Oh goodness me! I haven't heard lots of them talk about education particularly. I mean, I would say I've got to support Elizabeth Truss on maths. I mean, for maths, she's been an outstanding lifelong supporter of maths schools and mathematics. So just on the educational side, I'd go there. I think Penny in terms of, you know, just what she overcame with sick parents, was a young carer herself and looked after her brother. I think young carers in schools are really important. So, you know, I kind of feel passionate about that. I think let's have a think who else there. I mean, we could go through there's something on the Nadeem. I cannot help but say he's out now, but I mean, Nadeem's passion, having come to the country as a refugee and what he's done there is amazing. And I could go through all of them. I think there's a little bit of everything, but goodness knows what's going to happen. What I'd like to see is just some stability, but whoever gets it, I think, needs to say to themselves, and we're not saying this enough, like as a nation, whoever wins should say, as Prime Minister, one of the most, over the last 10, 12 years, one of the most important things we've done is improve education. It is unrecognisable, so don't tear it up. Keep going, but let's keep going into those areas that we've left. And I would be urging any Prime Minister to be looking, because the children of today are the voters of tomorrow, and they're the workforce of tomorrow. And you know, it's just inestimably valuable to focus on them and get it right.
Well, thank you very much indeed for today. And so our message of get everyone back in September, get a leader, get a Prime Minister by September, get children into school by September. We're all looking to September, and we will certainly take you up on some of those themes. The care leavers, I think, and the missing attendance to particularly stand out. So thank you very much indeed for your time. And as I said, I wish that if you had been all our teachers, you know, I think we'd have all done better. But so enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much indeed for your time.